President could strike at any moment, and he could decide to do so over the weekend as the U.S. is building up those air and naval assets in the region.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case. I hope it's not, but I do think that war might be coming just because I think the Iranians are being duplicitous here. They have such an easy way out. The administration is talking to them about their nuclear program, about their ballistic missile program, about their malign activities all across the Middle East, around the world even. I think he sort of has to act having come up to the brink in this manner.
Is the U.S. going to strike a deal with Iran or strike militarily on Iran? Check out this great news clip for the latest assessment of what's going on. We'll watch it together and then we'll talk about it. But first, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Check this out.
Let's talk about Iran. The president has set a new timeline for Iran to make a nuclear deal with the United States. And we're all wondering if the president is going to make a move even this weekend. Watch this.
No. What is the goal if there is a U.S. military?
Well, we're either make a deal or we're going to get a deal one way or the other.
Please give them a deadline firm to make a deal.
I would think that would be enough time, 10, 15 days, pretty much maximum.
Christian, what are your thoughts here? Secretary of State Marco Rubio is headed to Israel next week to meet with Benjamin Netanyahu on the status of the ongoing nuclear talks. But look, the armada is growing. We've got major carriers in the air and at sea. The president could strike at any moment, and he could decide to do so over the weekend as the U.S. is building up those air and naval assets in the region.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case. I hope it's not, but I do think that war might be coming just because I think the Iranians are being duplicitous here. They have such an easy way out. The administration is talking to them about their nuclear program, about their ballistic missile program, about their malign activities all across the Middle East, around the world even, and also just their human rights atrocities. But I think if Iran came in from the cold and cut a deal on nuclear weapons, and literally all they have to do, all their centrifuges are probably already destroyed or ruined, but if there are any left, just line them up and run a bulldozer and then give up its supposed right to enrich uranium. They only have one electricity producing reactor in that whole country, and they have a deal with the Russians to supply their fuel and to take their expended fuel. They do not need to enrich. The only reason they wanted to enrichment is to have a nuclear weapons program. That's the only reason they enriched HEU, highly enriched uranium, up to 60%. That's way above what you would use for a reactor. So either they agree or I think the president will act. I think he sort of has to act having come up to the brink in this manner. And oil prices, I should add, oil prices do not reflect the fact that a fifth of the world's oil, or at least liquid petroleum, flows through the Strait of Hormuz and would be put at risk during a conflict.
Well, it's interesting. You know, you had the Munich Security Conference last weekend, and of course, Iran, China, among the leading headlines coming out of that. Of course, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, one of the Democrats attending this year's conference. Her performance was one of the big talkers after that. Watch this.
Would and should the U.S. actually commit U.S. troops to defend Taiwan?
You know, I think that this is such a, I think that this is of course a very long-standing policy of the United States. And I think what we are hoping for is that we want to make sure that we never get to that point. And we want to make sure that we are moving in all of our economic research and our global positions to avoid any such confrontation.
Well, everybody's wondering why she even went, certainly exposing herself with that word salad. But the president yesterday reacted. Watch this.
When you see the representatives there, like Gavin Newsom, he didn't know what he was doing. They didn't even know why. He didn't know why he was there. Or AOC, she was unable to answer a simple question. And she could have said, well, I'm studying it, and I'll report back to you next week. You know, you can get away with that. But she just went, it's actually, I think it could be a career-ending answer, because for 25 years, anybody running against her, I think Susie is going to use that little piece of stuff. It was not good.
What do you think, Christian? Your reaction?
Yeah, I think Trump nailed it in the sense that it was painful. I'm dating myself. It reminded me of Chevy Chase buying airtime in Three Amigos. But the fact that she doesn't know everything about Taiwan policy is okay. The fact that as a politician at her level, she didn't have a mechanism to pivot onto something that she could talk about. Well, I don't know the specifics about that. I'm still learning. But I think it's very important that the United States try and secure peace in the Western Pacific, blah, blah, blah. It really questions whether she can work at that top level, because I do think Democrats want to let off a primal scream in 28. Everyone, the prediction markets say that Gavin Newsom is the leader, but I think they may want someone crazier, and that was, I mean, and that she's the best option. So, you know, we'll see.
Tiana, jump in here. I think she wanted to run for president. I don't know after that what that says about her knowledge of foreign affairs.
Yeah, you know, doing the world peace like Trump has done, a little easier said than done, right? I'm curious about her attempt to attack Marco Rubio, who was incredibly well received in Munich, trying to strike a balance between telling Europe, this is what we need you to do, but we want to be an alliance. We have shared history. She attacks him for that. If you are a European looking to restore the American-Europe alliance, is that comforting, knowing that the left could wind up being also anti-transatlantic alliance?
Real quick, Christian.
Yeah, well, we expect the left-wing Europeans and the left-wing German government who funded the conference to be anti-American. It's just a little odd for Americans to take the spotlight in that role. Democrats just think it's another chance to take a pot shot at Trump, which is unfortunate.
There's a lot of talk right now about a possible war between the United States and Iran. So let's take a step back and ask a simple question. What would this war actually look like, and why are some arguing that now is the moment for it to happen? Well, first, the reality. The U.S. is already preparing for the possibility of weeks-long military operations, not just limited strikes. We see that reported on Reuters. Tens of thousands of U.S. troops and multiple carrier groups are positioned in the region as tensions rise. If a war happened, it would likely begin with air and cyber strikes on nuclear facilities, on missile bases, and command centers, not a ground invasion. This is a key difference from Iraq. Iraq required occupying a country. Iran would be about degrading capabilities, not rebuilding a nation. Why is it that some believe that toppling the Iranian regime would be good for America or in America's interest? Well, because the central issue is Iran's nuclear and missile programs and its regional proxy network. For years, U.S. strategy has aimed to stop Iran from expanding these capabilities, which many see as a long-term threat to regional stability in global energy markets. There's also a strategic argument about timing. Iran is facing internal unrest, economic pressure, and stalled negotiations, conditions that some analysts say weaken its ability to respond effectively. But we also have to be honest. A conflict would carry serious risks, including missile retaliation and the chance of a wider regional war. So the real debate isn't about whether war would be easy, it's whether acting sooner could prevent a far more dangerous future, especially if Iran were to ever cross the nuclear threshold. History teaches something profound. Peace is preserved not only by goodwill, but by clarity. Clarity about lines that cannot be crossed, clarity about the values that we're willing to defend. Because the deepest purpose of power is not domination, it's prevention. And here's the truth that we have to wrestle with. Sometimes the moral question is not whether a conflict is tragic, it always is. The question is whether failing to act would make the world a more dangerous place still. In the end, nations like people are judged not only by the wars that they fight, but by the future that they choose to protect. Strength at its best is not the will to fight. It's the courage to secure a world where fewer wars will ever be needed. If you like this content overall, that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Take care.